First of all, thank you everyone for attending. This is our latest WORAN event, which is titled Propellers and Barriers. And many thanks to Ruth, who's put together the panel. We've got some really good speakers today on our panel. I'll introduce them properly in a minute. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Catherine Kent and I'm chair of WORAN. And a little bit about WORAN. So we started a few years ago now, and it's a network with the aims of sharing expertise, building networks, basically becoming a really good community within OR for people who want to support women, are interested in issues that impact on women in OR. And therefore, as a reminder, this is a session open to not just women, but anyone with an interest in the topic. And we have several sponsors, which we very much appreciate. So on to today's session. So we've got a little bit of background that I'll cover, but then when we get onto the panelists properly, we have 4 panelists here to talk about their careers and what's helped them and potentially what barriers they had. We're also going to ask them to share some advice for us. So the panel are made up of Maria Batara, who's from the University of Bath, Paul Harper from University of Cardiff, Gilbert Owusu, who's from BT Group, but also president of the OR Society, and Heather Tewkesbury from the Smith Institute. The way I'll run the session is I've got some intro questions to cover propellers and barriers and advice. And then we'll have a large chunk for Q&A, so opportunity for audience to come in with questions. Feel free as we're going through to put questions in the chat as you think of them, but we won't necessarily interrupt the flow of the initial discussion. But we'll definitely come back to the questions. So feel free to put them in the chat, or when we get to the Q&A session, put up your hand and we will invite you in to join us. We will finish promptly by 2:30 because I know a lot of people will have other places to go. And I'm sure one of us will post the feedback form in the chat. Thank you for those who've put their who they are in the chat as well. That's great to see. And welcome to any new people who haven't been to one of our WORAN sessions before. As a reminder, we hold regular events, but also we do extra activities related to women in OR, for example, mentoring and networking. So look out for us at the next OR Society conference, which takes me on to, yes, the forthcoming events. So we're having a bit of a summer holiday. So there's no, although we usually have monthly events, we've decided to have a bit of a summer break. So our next get together will be at OR 66 in Bangor University in September. And we're having we haven't tried one of these before, but we're going to do a breakfast meeting. So opportunity to meet together over croissant or something else, coffee, and we'll talk through some important topics to us. And then our flagship event is our annual land lecture. And this year we've got Dervla Mitchell coming to talk, and she's engineer. And that's on the 8th of October. We tie it in with Ada Lovelace Day. And as for those who don't know, the land lecture is named after Elsa Land, a prominent woman in OR and mathematics. So let's get to today's session. So these are our panelists, but I will stop sharing the slides now actually, so you can actually see them. Hopefully that stopped sharing, yes. Great, and the panelists should be spotlighted so you can see them. So we're just going to start with a bit of a warm-up just so you can get to know everyone on the panel. So we're going to go in the order: Maria, Paul, Gilbert, then Heather. So can you give us a bit about yourself and your professional career journey to date? Keep it quite short at this intro thing because we've got lots of questions to get through. So yes, hand over to Maria.
Hi, lovely to be in the panel and thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be with you. As you said, I'm a professor now in Bath at the School of Management, but the initial stages of my career were actually quite adventurous because I started in Bologna in industrial engineering, ended up doing a master dissertation in University of Maryland with Professor Golden. And then during my PhD, I was shipped to Canada with Professors Scordo and Laporte, to Turkey in Boğaziçi University with Professor Altnel. And then finally, I ended up, after 1 year more in Turkey, I ended up in Southampton, where I started my career in the UK in the School of Mathematics. And then finally, I arrived in Bath, where I went from senior lecturer to professor. So the first stages of my career were quite adventurous, traveling, going around, setting up a lot of exciting research collaborations. And then the second part was a bit slower and standing here in Bath. I'm a single mom of a 9-year-old boy, and then I have a 10-year-old furry boy that is my cat Raj. I try to also cook quite a lot, take a few too many plants around my house, but the camera only spots light my face, so that's good. And I try to keep as balanced as possible my life with my career when I manage.
Thank you, Maria. Paul, if you go next.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on the panel, and thanks for the invite. So a little bit about myself. I attended a pretty much standard junior and school before heading off to Bath University to study maths, and so becoming the first person in my family to study for a degree. I guess my passion for maths was ignited at the age of around 9 or 10 in pretty much unusual circumstances. My mum was the secretary of our junior school that I attended, and this was mostly miserable for me because any time I got into trouble, I had to sit outside my mum's office whilst waiting for the headmaster. But actually, and also while my friends all skipped off merrily home after junior school, I had to wait for an hour or so after school for my mum to finish work. So it was just by chance that during that time waiting every evening, Mrs. Evans, my year 5 teacher, started giving me some extra maths lessons because she was passionate about it too. And then I learned all sorts of fun things from her, like why is pi 3.14 by cutting up a circle into small segments and rearranging it to form a rectangle and taking the ratio to 2 sides, stuff that I never would have encountered until at least year 9 later in secondary school. So that really excited me about maths. I got a lot to thank Mrs. Evans for. After studying maths at Bath, I did a 4-year degree of replacement year. I stumbled into OR thanks to a final year module in optimization, and one of my housemates' girlfriend happened to be studying an MSc in OR at Southampton. So next thing I find myself in Chris Potts' office at Southampton being offered a scholarship. So thanks to the generosity of that, I was able to go on and delay start to work and continue my studies. After my MSc, just very briefly, I was offered several jobs. I'm very fortunate. I ended up working as Capgemini for a couple of years as a management consultant. I didn't find it terribly fulfilling. It was back in the late 90s. All my work was around Y2K when we all thought the world was going to end on the 1st of January. Remember that? And the single currency, working with banks on the euro. That was yawn. Anyway, so I went back to Southampton to study for a PhD. My family thought I was absolutely bonkers. I gave up a good salary and a stable job to go back on a £5,000 a year stipend. But sometimes you have to take a step of faith. I never looked back really, because after the PhD, I was lucky to get a lectureship at Southampton after a short postdoc stint. And then 5 years after that, I found myself, after senior lecturer, moving to Cardiff to take up a position as chair in OR. So I've been here 17 years now in Cardiff. I feel like I'm honorary Welshman status. It's been a fantastic and challenging 17 years. We've built up the OR group, and in particular, I'm proud to say that after about 40 or so PhD students and postdocs, over 2/3 have been female, which is fantastic. Outside of work, I love to travel with my family, occasional games of tennis and golf. And although my body and shape size doesn't suggest, there was a time when I used to ballroom dance. And actually, I represented Bath University in ballroom dancing competitions and won some trophies. So I guess my life goal now is to get celebrity status and then appear on Strictly. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thanks for inviting me to today's session. Yeah, so I am Data and AI Director at BT, looking after our internal units, our corporate functions, the OpenReach part of our business, and also networks. I joined BT 26 years ago, finishing my PhD in AI. And back then, you couldn't really talk about the technology because it was during the AI winter. But most of the work I did early on in my career was to use optimization techniques, cuts across OR as well, to help optimize the way BT utilizes its resources, primarily in the field force space. And we've applied those capabilities to other resource types within the organization. So my career was in applied research, and then moved into operations, ensuring that we have our data, basically looking at it end to end. So not just the capability, but including the data bit as well. I got exposed to OR during my undergrad course, SSM at the time, and then of course during my MBA, with it's a given, you do OR courses there as well. Outside work, I have two adult kids. Well, adult kids doesn't go together. Yeah, my kids are now 20, 21, 19, and they are into music. Interestingly, they didn't pursue the path that both my wife and I were on. They are musicians, and spent a lot of my time traveling over the weekends, taking them to rehearsals or concerts and all that, and that exposed me a lot. So jazz, my younger son is a jazz trumpeter, so I have got into that a bit more, and yeah, allows me to relax when I'm not focusing on work.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Gilbert. And Heather.
Yeah, hi. Lovely to join this group. So on the career side of things, I did an undergrad degree in maths and then started a master's degree, but just the kind of the course didn't really suit me and what I wanted to do. So I was lucky enough to find a PhD position at Birmingham University, which was in the chemical engineering department, and it was funded by Cadbury, who were just down the road at Bourneville. And it was mathematical modelling of chocolate manufacture, and I didn't take a lot of persuasion when they offered me the post. So did that for 3 years, and then went to work at Cadbury as the modelling development manager. So basically the only person who identified as a mathematician in the company at that time. And I worked there for about another 3 years, and then went on to join the Smith Institute. At that point, when Cadbury and Treball Bassett merged, and we had, the option to reapply for jobs and things like that, it sort of creates a moment where you think, oh, what do I want to do? Anyway, so I felt like I needed to stretch myself a little bit and applied for Smith Institute in the role of technology translator, where I was employee number 4. So I went from a very big organisation down to this tiny one. And I was working with academics and postdocs and research students, and also with companies and government departments, trying to translate the mathematical research on those projects between the business language and mathematics, which was great because it gave me a lot of exposure to different applications, different companies, different academic departments. And then over the years, I moved into a role which was a business development manager. So I was trying to find opportunities for mathematics to solve problems that the Smith Institute could work on. I did that for a few years and became business development director, joined the board, then I was promoted to CEO. That was about 7 years ago now, and last year I stepped down as CEO because I wanted to work part-time, and I sort of designed a job which I really wanted to do, which is what I do now as Chief of Strategic Relationships. So that's all about building relationships for important things that the world and the country have to deal with, where mathematics can play a role, and so that's what I do now. So in my 3-day weekend, which is every weekend, I have a day of fun, which usually involves some cold water swimming or kayaking or something like that. I have a day of relaxing, and which might involve a bit of gardening or something like that. And usually a day of household jobs that you have to do. But that's the sort of balance that I really wanted to get.
Great, thank you, Heather. And wow, what a great panel. We really got the creme de la creme here. All have such, even though, you think of mathematics are quite narrow, you've all had very different career journeys. So I'm keen to get onto the propellers. So thinking about what's helped you. So I'm going to go same order again. So Maria, Paul, Gilbert and Heather. So starting with Maria then, what were the key propellers or driving forces that have helped you achieve your career goals?
Yeah, I think I summarized all the traveling that I've done in the first 8 or 9 years before, because I think that was actually the key of establishing a strong career start and a strong CV. Because I came from an institution that had a good reputation. I work with very famous professors. I had publications with extremely big names in the field. So in the first 6 to 8 years of my career, I established that network of collaborators that allowed me then to publish and be involved in a lot of projects and be in a very good research community as well. So I established myself in the research community through all these travels, periods of exchange, attending conferences, and putting myself out there. It all came at a cost as well, because every time you are in a different environment, especially as a woman, you need to prove your value. And every time you need to find a way to show that you are there for a good reason, you are competent, you are capable, and you are up for the challenge. But at the same time, all the sacrifices and this work around allowed me then to have a very good start in my career. I finished my PhD with 6 publications. So that was quite exceptional, and I could find immediately positions right after my PhD. And even today, I still collaborate with some of the people I met those days, and I still have great connections with all my network of collaborators. So I think that was, I was very lucky to be in a good place, to be given the opportunity to work with excellent people, but I also took the challenge on board, and I had the courage to take all these steps and create all these collaborations.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm likely to come back with another question on that, but let's hear from the rest of the panel first. So Paul, same question to you. What were the key propellers?
Yeah, I think like Maria, maybe it's some are just lucky. I mean, I was as lucky, for example, to have the lectureship position came up at Southampton when I was still there as a postdoc, and so that meant, for example, I didn't have to move away like many people do, and particularly we had at that point a young family, and my wife was working too full time, so actually that meant we could stay where we were familiar with our friends and family. So that was a bit of luck, I guess. But other things that have really supported me is definitely, again, networks, but definitely the OR Society, for example. So I remember as an early career researcher being a little bit going to meetings like the the Blackett Memorial Lectures or whatever, all these events, and being quite daunted by being in the same room as all these professors of OR that I've read their papers, and it's intimidating. And actually getting to speak to them and realizing they're just human beings like all of us. So actually, that was kind of breaking down those barriers. And as a result, actually throwing myself into the OR Society very early on in my career, even as part of a PhD student. I mean, I chaired the Young OR, as it was then, New to OR conference as a PhD student, and then went on the general board and everything. And that was really, really helpful, making those connections, particularly to others who could therefore help mentor me and ask for that kind of support, as well as making connections, therefore, to other academics as well in similar area of healthcare modeling. So that really enabled me to make connections to other universities, and that helped, for example, then with grant applications and so on. So for me, it was definitely majority of has been the propeller has been the networking, particularly through the OR Society. So I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Paul. Gilbert, same question to you.
Thanks, Catherine. So for me, it's been mentoring. So, I remember when I started my degree, because I wasn't thinking of a PhD at all. I was just thinking, okay, let me finish this, probably do a master's. But I was exposed earlier on to some mentors who went through to do PhDs, were lecturing at the time, and that encouraged me. And again, they had done work, their research was around AI and all that. So that exposed me. I remember, a key mentor of mine came to BT in '97 and then said, look, there is an opportunity here. Why don't you come? And that's how I joined BT. And I still stay very closely in touch with him. But it has been every stage of my career. When I look back where I've made progress, it's been with the support of mentors. Moving up the ladder, mentoring. Okay, when I had to break into senior management, I mean that required a lot of mentors, okay, to help me navigate that path. So yeah, for me, mentoring is key. I also got the opportunity outside of work, to get input from wider family and friends, and when I was coasting would give me the kick. There is more that you can do. So that also keeps me on my toes. So yeah, in summary, for me, mentors and other inputs outside of work. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. Okay, Heather, same question.
Yeah, so like Gilbert, I've also used different mentors over the years for different reasons. And just sometimes when I felt a bit stuck in something, I've found it helpful to talk to someone who's not sort of directly related to the thing I'm thinking about. So I found that really useful. I think also, though, an important thing for me was really identifying what core values were important to me, and that helped me to work out what I really wanted for the business that I was leading, and also for my own to sort of guide my own decisions. So that was really helpful, and also having an employer who sort of sees the bigger picture and is supportive of me, has been supportive of me and still is, in getting involved in things that relate to the wider mathematical community. So I think the networks that I've built up over the years through those various initiatives and activities have all been really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. I'm going to follow up, starting with Heather and then Gilbert. So, because you both mentioned mentoring, I was interested to know if you had any advice for others around getting a mentor, anything around the mentorship process. And also out of interest, do you still have a mentor even in your sort of experience, part of your career?
So I'll answer the second part of that first, which is that I don't currently have a mentor. I mentor a few other people. But at the same time, you know, if there was something that I kind of felt stuck with and thought that an outside view would help me to unblock it, then you know, I'm always open to that. But my advice about finding a mentor is actually to be quite creative. And over the years, I've approached various people to ask for help, and nearly all of them have said yes. So I kind of think, what's the worst that can happen if you just ask? I've even gone to the length of hearing somebody on Desert Island Discs on Radio 4 and being quite inspired by their story and sending an email to them. I guessed the email address, sent an email asking if I could meet them for 20 minutes. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? She doesn't reply, and I've lost nothing. And after a week or so, she did reply, and she was the CEO of a big company. And she basically referred me to one of her C-suite colleagues, and that person became my mentor for a year or so. So yeah, just be creative in how you find people who might be able to help you.
Brilliant, thank you, Heather. Gilbert, have you got anything to add on being a mentor, getting a mentor?
Yeah, so I do have mentors, both internally and externally, and for different reasons. What I've realized is that they give me different perspectives. I was talking to one earlier on this week concerning an issue I have at work. He's not in the company, but was able to give me a perspective that I found very useful. So I do keep in touch and have regular check-ins with them. In terms of our approach, similar to Heather, I approach people, some open and willing to help. Others, definitely after the first session, you sort of know that this you know, the desire to move forward isn't there. So yeah, I don't progress with those, but clearly approaching people and being very intentional. In my case, maybe, you know, looking at where I would want to take my career, and I talk to approach those with who have been there, or who I'm aspiring to be, and also externally, just for external perspective as well, and a different way of thinking. So that's what I would say. Just reach out. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And Paul and Maria, you both mentioned having a network, being able to reach out to a network. So I was wondering if you had advice on how you managed to build that network and maintain that professional network.
In my case, it was a mix. I was lucky to be in a very good and research-oriented department, and my supervisor did really help me a lot to create these connections at the beginning, and also taught me the culture of a research community. So when I would interact with colleagues, I knew more or less what to expect, which kind of talk was a talk, how to have a proper meal with them. I've been trained very well in Bologna to be part of the research community. But then I had to also put myself forward. So if I had to go to conferences, I had to force myself to speak with people and say, why don't we start a research project together? And initially it's a very hard question to put forward to a colleague, or showcase that you are also capable, and you're not just the 1 out of 10 women at the conference, for example. So I think it was a mix of being in the right research environment, and I think picking a good institution and a good supervisor is key when you start your career in operational research. But also having that courage to take the opportunity to go abroad for an exchange and apply for that grant to be able to study abroad or with another supervisor or to go to a conference. So I think it's a mix of picking the right supervisor and the right institution, but also work a lot and taking that courage to create those key connections for your future. And last thing, you need to kiss some frogs sometimes to find the right collaborators. Sometimes you put yourself also in trouble, and that's part of the game.
That's interesting. Paul, did you have anything to add there?
No, Marie has articulated it really well. I mean, yeah, not terribly. I mean, but definitely, taking the time, taking all the opportunities afforded to you, really. So, I had a strange situation, for example, that my PhD supervisor had fallen out with colleagues in another faculty in Southampton. I won't give names, but Mass wasn't talking to the management school. And actually, the first time I met some key people in this area was actually in Beijing at the IFOS conference. We had to go that far before I was allowed to speak secretly to people in management. So, but it's those opportunities you'd have to take and be brave to step out. And I was just a PhD student, and again, it was a bit intimidating speaking to some of these very big names in the area. But yeah, taking opportunity to pursue networks like this, but also saying no to others, because there's a lot of opportunities you might get dragged down certain routes, which actually you don't think really suit your own research needs or whatever. So actually being willing to say no as well, rather than otherwise being pulled in so many different directions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the advice there as well. We're going to move on to the barriers now. And I'm going to start with Heather and then Maria, because I think my question might be more relevant to you. Just because I was just interested if you'd faced any specific challenges or barriers related to your gender or other personal characteristics. But if that doesn't apply, feel free to talk about any other barrier that you've faced in your professional journey.
Yeah, so I think as I've gone through my career, I've not really felt barriers as such. When I look back now, with the benefit of hindsight, there were a few things that kind of niggled me at the time, like going to an event that Smith Institute was hosting and being asked by, being one of the very few female participants, where everyone is technical, has a technical background, but being asked things about what time the tea was being served and where the cloakroom was and whether they can have a new name badge and things like that, because they just made some assumptions that I was there to, I don't know, do those things. And so, there are things like that just kind of repeatedly happen. And I had a colleague at the time who had a brilliant way of handling it, which was to give the shortest possible answer she could to the question. So, do you know what time it is? No. And then follow up with a question about theoretical physics or something, just to, I suppose in a way, just to kind of shock that person into thinking, oh gosh, I underestimated this person, and perhaps next time they would remember that feeling of being shocked because they'd underestimated or they'd made some assumptions that were irrelevant. So I think those sorts of things, you can think of them as they're annoying, but they also build some resilience, I think. And if I can find ways to deal with them and make the person that's making those assumptions sort of jolt into, oh, I've made a wrong assumption there, then I kind of feel that's a helpful thing to do for everybody involved.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I imagine a lot of the audience will recognise some of those instances. Maria, same question for you.
Yeah, I think for me, the barrier or a bit of a period of massive change in my career was when I had my child and I went on maternity leave. And I think it's the same probably even if you have any caring responsibility, a disability or an illness. So I couldn't anymore use all my coping mechanisms to prove that I was competent, capable, always prepared, organized. Because of all of a sudden I was extremely sleepy, I was extremely tired, I had other priorities. I remember one day trying to make a computer programming code on the playing mat with my child and realizing that I couldn't code anymore because my brain was just not there anymore. So for me, that was a big shift in my career. I realized I couldn't anymore run a marathon. I didn't have any more the resources and the time for that. I couldn't travel as much. A lot of our work is about relationships, collaborations, conferences, and all of a sudden my ability to travel was very limited. The possibility of changing job and moving somewhere else for a promotion was almost impossible. I couldn't take my whole family away. So all of a sudden, all my coping mechanisms and ways of showing my value and establishing my career were somehow out of the window. So for me, that was a big period of change, and definitely my career had to slow down. So I would say that was, I think maternity or a period of caring or illness can be really daunting in a academic career.
Great, thank you very much, Maria. So, similar question to Gilbert and Paul, but I'm happy to widen it out. So I'm interested in the barriers. That could be related to your personal characteristics, but it may also be something wider. So if I do Paul and then Gilbert.
Yeah, I think, well, some of the barriers that have been ongoing in my career, I guess, in sense is, you know, in academia, sometimes just thrown in a deep end, it feels like that. I think things have got a lot better now, thankfully, with mentoring and schemes to help. But there was lots of times where, you know, when you got your first lectureship, for example, everyone just assumes you know how to write a grant or you know how to supervise a PhD student, where you've only had your own experience as a student. So you suddenly realize, or very quickly realize, that every student has their own needs and style of supervision. So, but there's nobody to train you. You kind of just found myself repeatedly in my career finding my own way. And even in, you know, even more senior levels still, when you get your first grant, even, you know, how you manage that grant, I found there was not really anyone to tell me how to be a principal investigator on a grant. So I think that has got a lot better though now, thankfully, in terms of universities providing that support network and that. But I did feel quite a lot of times in my career that I just found my own way. And for me, it's actually not been too much of a problem. I quite enjoyed that independence and find it would have been really nice at some times for people just to signpost me in the right direction. So I think that's been about. Just very quickly, one other barrier, which is something I didn't ever expect, but has cropped up more recently, is well, I've probably spent my time in my career academically so far equally in England and Wales, and it's really, really strange that it's a bit frustrating really, but a barrier. It seems to be about perception sometimes about Wales, a little kind of small country, not necessarily important, particularly when we trying to publish, and have even had examples from reviewers back from mostly North American journals which say our readers are not interested in a case study applied to Wales, so i.e. little Wales not of interest. So that has been a barrier, and I'm not sure how you overcome that actually, without just obviously seeking a journal which actually doesn't have such biases and finding a home for it. But that just kind of persists sometimes, which is just quite annoying, frankly.
Yeah, good one. Thanks, Paul. Gilbert.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. For me, it's been, I would say, the challenge of progressing within an environment that there is relatively low change. So I started my career in the applied research part of BT, and great environment to work in. Okay, but very difficult to move up because there wasn't room up. Okay, and I found myself repeatedly stuck in you know, a senior role in that department for many years, until I decided to move out. So that was I could say the barrier. I should have done that earlier on in my career, but I didn't. So that is one. And then maybe I wouldn't say it's a barrier, but more the maybe until recently, when there has been a lot of focus around biases and all that, it didn't really occur to me much. But I don't naturally think along those lines. But one of the challenges that came up is the way people misconstrue expressions, okay, for other things. So when I'm very passionate, I can be I'm passionate about a topic or whatever it is, very energetic, okay, in my expressions. And I have found in some instances for people to misinterpret that as being emotional or, you know, whatever. And that I've seen that expressed in other settings, not just for me, but probably others that have come from West Africa. I come from West Africa, so I have seen that. And of course, being in the position I am in now, making every effort to educate others. I have a colleague who is Italian, and whenever, I mean, Italians are also energetic. So when people comment to say that, look, diversity or be inclusive or whatever it is. So that's quite comforting to see that it's not just, you know, myself or a few others, but yeah, maybe others from the European continent also have, or some people from the European continent have similar experiences.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for those insights, Gilbert. It's great. I'm just looking at the time, so I think it's only fair that I let audience ask some questions before I come back with someone about advice for others. But it may be that our audience member cover that anyway. So I can't see any questions in the chat, but did anyone have a question? Just put up your hand. Okay, I think, is it Rachel with your hand up?
Yeah, just trying to figure out how to turn on all the buttons. Not very good with Zoom, sorry.
That's all right, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, hi, thank you. It's been really interesting to hear all of your experiences, and it's very kind of you to share them all so honestly with us. I guess I have a question really about, well, kind of to the networks and the mentoring, I guess, but more so to the mentoring question, which is it feels like if you're reaching out to somebody, you probably should have in mind what it is you want from them or what the question is. And I very rarely have that. I just have a sense that I would quite like a bit of like a conversation with somebody about, you know, so I'm wondering to what extent you are all very clear when you make contact with people, what it is you want and whether that's necessary.
Will I take that first? So when you were describing that, you said, you know, you need you just kind of want to have a conversation about. And so I think if you know what the about is, or even if it's like, I don't know how to unpick this messy situation, or so I don't think you have to have a really specific question. I think you can be quite vague, because a mentor or a coach, and you know, there are different approaches, but they should be able to help you to unpick actually and to work out what that question is. And they shouldn't be the ones answering that question. They should be helping you to try and work out what the question is. or what the answer might be, what sort of solution might be. So I think it's absolutely fine to have a sort of a general thing in mind, but not necessarily a really specific question.
Thanks, Heather. That's good. Did anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Heather. I think some mentors want very specific scope. Okay. Others are open and will, I mean, as Heather said, help with the process of more the process type. Okay, help you to articulate whatever it is that you may not be able to articulate properly. So it depends. So getting to know what the expectations are from a mentoring point of view, and whoever you're talking to helps. Okay, so that you approach them in that light. But then again, career-wise, it could be big themes. I guess it could be related to, well, I think I like the OR mission. Okay, I see that surfacing in most conversations I have these days, either related to how you are dealing with your stakeholders or whatever it is. That's a community vibrant type thing, or is it to do with disability, or is it to do with your delivery value? So there could be big themes that if you think through properly, or probably go through a session with your mentors, could fall into some of these areas, and that it's always helpful when you're engaging with them. That's my experience anyway.
And can I just add, I do think it's helpful as well if you know that the person you're approaching has some kind of relevant experience or expertise. They don't have to be like, you know, the world expert on whatever it is you're looking for, but just to know that they might understand the dynamics at play or the various factors involved in the challenge that you're working with. I think that is an important part of trying to identify the right sort of person.
In my case, I've always been a bit reluctant to have a formal mentor, so I never had a formal mentor to guide my career path. And I was always very allergic to those leadership training courses that I always try to send you to. But I'm the kind of person that if I have a problem, I always have 2 or 3 people for each problem that I definitely go and knock at the door and ask for help. So I think it's easier for me to know that for that problem, I can ask for advice to that colleague. Or if I just need to vent out, I have a set of friends that can listen. So I think it's, for me, it's more than a mentor. What worked out is this set of relationships and collaborators and administrators that I can really rely on. And depending on the problem, I pick the brains of one or the other. So your trustee network of people, I think it's really valuable. It's easier to know who's the right person for each problem you're facing, probably.
Yeah, thank you. And I see Paul nodding along to that as well. So it's really helpful to see those different approaches to solving the similar sort of problem, I suppose, but having different ways of going about it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the question, Rachel. Paul, did you want to add anything? Sorry, we cut you off.
No, sorry, I interrupted Maria. No, I was just exactly that kind of thing. I mean, I never had, like Maria, a particular mentor, but just as I said earlier about being part of these networks like the society and so on, it's really helpful. You never know who you're going to need or when. So just building that network, being nice to people, because you never know when you want them to be nice to you. So it's not necessarily having something specific in mind, but just building that network, particularly in academia, has been really useful, because getting to know people in your field, and you know, you might never need them as a mentor, but they're always there to reach out to you. Don't be scared to reach out to them.
Thank you so much.
Oh, there is my mentee. She just left. No.
Fantastic. So I'm going to give you a fairly open question to end with, which is what advice would you give to women in OR? And I'm going to do it in reverse order. So it'll go Heather, Paul, Gilbert. No, Heather, Gilbert, Paul, and then Maria.
So I've thought about this question in terms of what advice would I give to my younger self? And of course, not all women will be like I was, but so my advice to my younger self would be about being brave and that knowing that your opinions are valuable and important to share. And it's good to have conversations about those, even if they feel a bit difficult, because that will usually get to a better outcome for everybody. So I think that would be my main thing, and also to try and work to identify what's really important to you, because then that can guide, you know, your choices and behaviours, and that I think has been really, really good for me.
Excellent, be brave, fantastic. So let's do Gilbert next. Gilbert, we can't hear you. If you,
Thank you.
that's it.
Yeah, actually, I like that. Be brave. And I think, yeah, when I reflect, I mentioned I overstayed a particular function for various reasons, but just being brave and being willing to move. I think it's easy to get comfortable from my point of view, and just being willing to move. And also, you know, institutions change, personnel change, and when that happens, if things don't align with your values, I think it's time to think about making a move to where you know your strengths, you can build on your strengths, deliver value, and reap whatever benefits are associated with those.
Fantastic, thank you, Gilbert. Paul, you've worked with a lot of women, you said, a lot of your cohorts have been predominantly female. So what sort of advice do you give them?
Yeah, I obviously can't speak on behalf of women, but observation wise, one thing is a bit like what Heather said, be brave, but also just, self-confidence really, because I've seen extremes, I guess. I've seen those women who I think are very confident in terms of, and also want like pushing for promotion and know where they stand in their field, etc. But more often than not, it's unfortunately the other end of the spectrum. It's those women who perhaps are a bit more nervous, a bit more reticent to perhaps go for promotion, even though they're meeting the benchmarks. As one example, I've in the house here, I have my wife and I've got 2 daughters. I see that also at home. I'm sure they won't mind me saying. It's maybe in just the DNA. I don't know. It's, for example, my wife's is a secondary school teacher. I'm sure she won't mind me saying, but I mean, I get frustrated as a bystander when she doubts herself. And I know she's a brilliant teacher. She gets great feedback, and she won't push sometimes and make herself a bit more forceful. And my daughter, who's 17, she's like a waitress. And for example, she hasn't had a pay rise for 2 years, and she wouldn't ask for one. And I kept saying, you've got to ask. And she just was, for whatever reason, just didn't want to push herself. And then she found out that others were being paid £2 an hour more than her, and they were younger. And I threatened to go in and of course that's the worst thing a dad can do, is embarrass your daughter. So that was the final straw really. And then she did ask, and funnily enough, she got the pay rise. So, and she was deserving of it. But it's just that reticence, it's that self-belief, I think, which I see is sometimes that can be a barrier. And I guess I'm not quite sure why that is, but that certainly I've seen in both home and in work.
Right, thank you very much, Paul. And finally, Maria.
Excellent advice from everyone. I have 3, but I'll try to be super brief. I think one key for women is to align your career objectives with your values and the people you love. I'm very much up for a fight if I can make my PhD student then go to an international conference or publish their first paper, or write a grant if it's in the benefit of my junior colleague. Whereas probably I wouldn't do it if it's just for my own career progression. So there is nothing better than a woman that has a strong motivation. Then we pick up all the fights. The second one is play the long game. So even if you need to slow down because you have 1, 2, 3, many children or any issue in your life, don't worry, it's a 40 years career. We'll catch up. So take the breaks as they come and accept the fact that it's just a period. Don't give up. And I think the third one, very pragmatically, learn how to say no. There is a lot that comes on our plate in academia, a lot of excellent possible projects, activities, and so on and so forth. We really need to be selective and go for the ones that align with our career progression, and we cannot be dragged into everything because we want to contribute. So protect your time.
Yeah, I really like that, Maria. Making sure you say no. Excellent. So I think we're pretty much out of time. I think if we ask another question, we'll go over. So with that, can I, thank the panel so much. It was really a really good use of an hour. I've learned a lot. And this session's been recorded, so we'll be able to share that. So a lot of the WORAN people will be able to access that. So thank you so much for taking the time. Is there any other final reflections from the panel before we let you go?
Attend the WORAN.
Yeah,
It's fun and useful.
good plug there, Maria. Thank you very much. In that case, again, big thanks. And as I mentioned at the start, thanks to Ruth for setting up this event and managing to put the panel together. And thanks for attending, everyone. And please fill out the feedback form. But with that, I'll wish you all a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.